sende. Dünya dönüyor, dersen de yıllar geçiyor, fark etmesen de. Dünya dönüyor, sen de dersen de yıllar geçiyor, fark etmesen de. La la la la la.
Biz bu kadar yıl nasıl geçti fark etmedik. Çünkü insanlar ve ihtiyaçlar değişse de 69 yılın her anı sizin için çalıştık, sizin için ürettik. Dünya döndükçe Vakıfbank daima seninle. Birlikte nice senelere.
Yıllar geçermiş geçsin ruhumuz gence.
Good morning, everyone. It's a rainy day, and we appreciate you all being here today. Second day of the summit is about to start. Certainly a lot to talk about today as well. And now, this year is of particular importance for Türkiye for one main reason, because Türkiye has just marked its centennial, the century of Türkiye. So if you were in Türkiye on the 29th of October this year, you may remember the spectacular events that took place across the country, celebrations that took place across Türkiye's 81 provinces, with the main one taking place here in Istanbul. I'm not sure if you watched the naval parade, which included more than 100 warships. Then my favorite was the drone show, and Efnan, you and I were on air at the time. I remember.
Were indeed.
It was spectacular to watch. Certainly, century of Turkey is something that is of paramount importance for the country.
Right, and in that scale of importance, education is also at the top of the list. And new achievements and developments, as I mentioned, await our country in the new era while we set sail with the vision of the century of Türkiye. An important pillar of these developments, as I mentioned, will be in the field of education. It is precisely for this purpose that the Turkish Marif Foundation endeavors all over the world to raise the flag of this beautiful, beautiful country, Türkiye.
Indeed. And now, before we begin the second day of the summit, let's watch this video, which marks Türkiye's century, made by Marif Foundation.
Türkiye Marif Vakfı olarak
As Turkish Marif Foundation, we do take place in the international education field to represent our country. With the inspiration we take from Turkey's bridge position, we do dedicate ourselves for a higher quality education and to give an education opportunity to as many students as possible. We do not limit ourselves to education. Of course, we would like to make our name heard through friendship and friendly relationships with our friends in the world. We work non-stop and we endeavor to raise people with good future and good values for the well-being of human beings.
As we watched yesterday, the videos of the good practices in education from the Marif schools in different countries, we will continue to see particular videos of those good practices throughout the day today as well. This time, we are going to Mali to see the African Marif sports games. Let's have a look.
African Marif sports games are internationally organized and it's breaking grounds in the world. The students who are receiving education in Marif schools do come together with other schools and they do this joint event.
dahil 10 ülkeden
1,500 participants from 100 different schools have participated in Mali sports games, and also the ambassadors of the participating countries and many bureaucrats from Mali participated to Mali sports games. The Minister of National Sports and the president of Turkish Mali Foundation, Professor Dr. Birol Akgün, was among the participants.
Lors de ces Jeux sportifs, j'étais ravie, j'étais contente de montrer mes capacités.
During these games, we came together with many young people of different ages. We did have a lot of competitions in different fields. It was a very valuable experience for me. And likewise, in order to realize my dreams, I needed some skills, and with the help of the schools, I am receiving some trainings to improve my skills. We are trying to contribute to the purposes and objectives of Marif schools by organizing these events. This award means to me that my dreams can come true. It proves that I can realize even the dreams as long as I have confidence in myself. I believe that it's possible. My future sporting goals are to develop further and to participate in other international competitions around the world. My future goals would be to improve physically and technically to qualify for the Olympic Games. In the future, we want to honor Mali and show that Mali is a great sports country. On the first day of the event, a minute silence was observed in memory of the victims of the earthquake that hit Turkey. This gesture touched me and all our Turkish friends. We asked Marif authorities to organize these kind of events in 2024 in Mali. You should not rely on muscles or physical strength. Mind strength is also important, because I believe I had that mental strength, and there were athletes who were more muscular than me, but I won. The most important thing that the tournament is very, very permanent. It is a tradition, and Marif's innovation and our dream, we know that they can come true thanks to these kind of events. The children can reinforce their social and physical activities. We can say that sports is a uniting power in Africa. If you want something, then you have to work for it, because there will be some obstacles on your path, and you have to overcome them.
Field, something I've never seen before.
Right.
Physical activity is an integral part of education, and I believe one way to remain physically active is to engage in a sport. So the African Marif Games are serving exactly that purpose, and as the education coordinator, Mr. Cesar, highlighted, this is an integral part not just for the African Marif Games, but also for the Marif Foundation.
Right, and as I mentioned yesterday, Jafar, there's a lot we can learn from these students that are taking part in the Marif Foundation's events, such as one of the students, she said perseverance is key, and that strength comes from the mind before our physical strength. Nothing is impossible as long as you have confidence in yourself. Another quote from one of the students in that video.
And we are certainly grateful for one of the students who expressed solidarity and his condolences for the earthquake victims here in Turkey, the earthquake that took place on the 6th of February, claiming the lives of tens of thousands of people. So we are grateful for their brotherhood.
Indeed. It's now time for the first session of the Istanbul Education Summit, which is titled Education in the Century of Türkiye. As Türkiye moves forward, education will continue to be driving force, fostering innovation, inclusivity, and competitiveness on both national and international stages. The commitment for creating a virtuous generation remains at the forefront of Türkiye's educational mission in the century ahead.
All right, let's begin by inviting our speakers to the stage. First and foremost, please welcome Azmi Özcan, Professor of Department of History at Fatih Sultan Mehmet Vakıf University. Professor Özcan is known in the international community for his research on colonial history, Ottoman modern history, and South Asian Muslims. He wrote 4 books published in the field of recent Ottoman history and penned down many articles in different languages. Professor Özcan, welcome.
Our next speaker is Halil Berktay. He is the professor of School of Education at Ibn Khaldun University. Professor Berktay served as a history program coordinator, Turkish studies program coordinator, Sabancı Summer School coordinator, and Sabancı Harvard Summer School coordinator at the same university. His research interests include historiography, the formation of Turkish nationalism and national memory, the Turkish revolutions in comparative perspective, and so on. Welcome to the stage, Professor Berktay.
And now please welcome Associate Professor Celile Okten, Turkish Deputy Minister of National Education. Ms. Okten worked as a professor in the Department of Educational Programs at the University of Wisconsin-Madison between 2006 and 2007. She conducted postdoctoral research on language planning and language policies. She served as an education counselor in Bern between 2022 and 2023 and was appointed Deputy Minister to the Ministry of National Education in the Republic of Turkey on the 22nd of June, 2023. Welcome.
And last but not least, I would now like to invite our moderator to the stage, Professor Dr. Cihat Demirli, the President of the Board of Education of the Turkish Ministry of National Education. Welcome, Professor. He established the Lifelong Learning Coordination Office at Istanbul Commerce University in 2011. At this coordination office, he was the director of the Continuing Education Research and Application Center. On behalf of the Council of Higher Education, he was appointed to the Turkish Marif Foundation's Board of Trustees back in 2016. Professor Demirli, I hope you and your guests have a great discussion.
Good luck.
Thank you. Herkese öncelikle günaydın.
First of all, I would like to say good morning to everybody. Today is the second day of our event, and I am very sure that following the discussions in the panels that we held yesterday, we have heard many beautiful presentations, and today we are together with you. We are hoping to host a good panel here with your participation as well, of course. As you all very well in the recent period in Turkey, as a reflection of the developments in many areas, there has been an important transformation in the field of education, well as many other fields. Turkey is conducting a lot of important studies in parallel to its vision for the new century of the nation, and I believe that these studies will have fruitful outcomes. Today we'll be talking about this century, the new century for the Republic of Turkey, and we have to know about our history, of course, in order to be able to talk about the next century. Therefore, we have our panelists here who are experts in their areas, especially in history. I would like to thank Turkish Marif Foundation for giving us the opportunity to speak here. Distinguished President, the distinguished members of the board, and the members of the Board of Trustees, I salute you with respect and affection. Our guests today are very, very valuable academics. The presenters, our speakers, have already informed us about their background. I would like to thank them, but I will briefly introduce them to you as well. And afterwards, I will be uttering a couple of sentences about how I will manage this panel. Then I will leave the floor to our speakers. Well, due to the water contest, I believe. We have started late to this session. Therefore, I will be granting 10 minutes to our speakers for stating their opinions in the first part. In the second part, each of them will have 5 minutes to talk, and afterwards we will, I believe, complete our panel in the due time. Among our students, we have a very important name, Miss Celile Ökten, who is working in the Ministry of National Education. She has a degree in Turkish literature in Boğaziçi University. Then she completed her master's degree in the Turkish literature in the same field, and then her PhD in the same field. She has issued many famous publications, and in Wisconsin University she did her studies about language policies, and in the same university in the cooperation with the Ministry of National Education in the US, she took part in the restructuring of language training in the States. Right now she is working in the ministry after working in Marmara University, Yıldız Technical University, and many other universities in Turkey. So she became the vice minister and the deputy minister. She is representing Ministry of National Education today, and she has participated in a lot of works both in Turkey and in abroad, and since June she has started her duty as the vice minister. Big welcome. Another valuable professor we have here, Professor Dr. Halil Berkay. He is working in the Human and Social Sciences faculty in Ibn Haldun University. He has worked as a historical department coordinators in the past, especially he coordinated Sabancı Summer School and Sabancı Harvard Summer Schools. Our professor is a historian who has completed his degrees in bachelor's degree in history and the master's and PhDs in history as well. When we take a look at the CV of our professor, we can see that Mr. Berkay has worked in many universities in Turkey as an assistant professor or a professor. He will be talking about reshaping the national memory and the Balkan historical books, curriculums, and the history of Marxism are among his areas of expertise. We have Professor Dr. Azmi Özcan from Fatih Sultan Mehmet Foundation University. He is in the history department in that university. He completed the religious faculty of Ankara University. Then he completed his master's degree in Manchester University in the field of history, and his PhD thesis was based on the relationship of Ottoman Empire and the United Kingdom. He came back to Turkey in 1992, and then he became an assistant professor in 1995, and since 2000 he has been awarded with the title of professorship. Our professor here has worked in many different universities. Right now, he is a member of the Board of Trustees in 19 Mayıs University, and he is the professor of history in Fatih Sultan Mehmet Foundation University. So this was the brief introduction of our guests. Now I will give the floor to Ms. Celile Ökten to deliver her speech to you. So, we will be talking about the century, the new century of Turkey, and the position of education in this new era for Turkey. You have 10 minutes. You can start to talk about change in education and leading this change.
First of all, it's a great pleasure for me to be in such a meaningful organization and to be in front of you. We have many colleagues here, many educators, distinguished guests. I would like to salute you all. As there will be interpretation, I will follow up my notes. Today, here, we will be together with the educators and the science people from all corners of the world, and we are going to talk about the century of Turkey education. And we have our moral and our values in the century of Turkey, and we have our innovative principles, we have our educators, our parents, our students, and we take all of them into center and we actualize this understanding of education. And we believe in human, we believe in people. I will stick to my notes, but other than that, I will be talking about the works of our ministry. I will give you some examples. And my duty for the innovative education, we also have a department for innovation and technologies. And as a teacher of Turkish language, I also focus on these issues because I'm a teacher on my own as well. So, what do? I look at the scenarios in the smart board, and as you know, AI will gain more and more importance in our near future. So, how can we use AI and how can we interact with AI, considering the emotional situation and social situation of our students? So we are trying to fictionalize all of them together. Of course, we would like to be horizons to our students because when we use education meticulously and properly, then we can raise right people for the future. And we need to merge innovative technologies into our education system, and we need to provide equal opportunities for all the students. And we have internet and technologies in 81 provinces of Turkey. And as the Ministry of Education, we are attaching great importance to this. And for uh, robotic coding, we are also establishing laboratories in all provinces and cities in Turkey. And in the near future, we are going to have innovative classrooms. We are going to transform our classrooms as it is present in UNESCO report. We are also paying attention to STEM education, and we are also adding STEM curriculum into our national curriculum. And we are acting according to the algorithms, coding, AI, using, and we are also trying to raise awareness in this area, especially in terms of digital tools. And again, in another international project, we are trying to increase the digital capacities and capabilities of our teachers, and we are providing vocational training to our teachers. And we have ÖBA, which is information network for our teachers, and we are trying to enrich this platform with different digital contents. And we think that digital transformation in education is very important. We need to embrace past and the future, and we need to ensure digital transformation. And we are crowning our educational system with different achievements, and we have another digital education platform, EBA, and we have EBA platform, and we this was the most visited education website in 2020, and we rank among the first countries in the world for the web training. And we have all the contents in EBA, and we are trying to pay attention to the contents according to digital era. Well, we have changed the interface of EBA, by the way, and we are updating EBA day by day. Maybe we have teachers today in the hall, and we also continue our work in the global scale. We have different activities, and we have also training centers, for example, in the Balkans, and we also have our European citizens, Turkish citizens living in the European area, and we are trying to reach them through our training centers and training education. Another issue is lifelong learning, and lifelong learning is generally oriented for our Turkish origin citizens living abroad. And we have digital platforms of these centers, public education centers, and we would like our Turkish origin people to receive training, and we want our people to use these facilities of our ministry. There are distance learning, and they can have education through internet, and they can come to Turkey to visit the physical lessons in our public training centers. And we are also supporting our young people, not only in terms of raising education, but also we are trying to raise people to work in our industry. And we have our incubation innovation centers for our young people. So if you are our young entrepreneurs, if you come to Ankara, then you are going to meet your counterparts, and you will visit the startups, you will see what they have designed so far. It will be a great opportunity for all of you. I will give you an example about that. Spotify, for example. Maybe you know Spotify, and they are designing the next phase of Spotify, for example, and we are following them with great attention. And especially in terms of education technologies, we are attending different conferences, different projects. For example, in order to support the foreign language learning, we also attended e-twinning activities, and we have been part of these activities since 2016. And as the Ministry of Education, we are closely following up the technological advancements, and according to the law 1416, we are also dispatching many students for masters or PhD to abroad, and we have our Department of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Relations. So, with the scholarship of our ministry, there are many experts visiting universities abroad for their masters or for different trainings, and then they come back to our country to provide services. They come back to our homeland, and they are also working in our country as academicians, and they are contributing to the education life of our country. Lastly, from Sivas Cumhuriyet University, I met a delegation, a group of students, and they were working on nanotechnology. And while ending my words, we are going to strengthen the moral values of our youngsters, our youth in the century of Turkey, and I would like to underline that our support will continue for our young people. Thank you so much. Our distinguished speaker, Celile Ökten, mentioned the century of Turkey and the necessities of the century. And she talked about the works conducted by the Ministry of Education and the advancements in Turkey and the global improvements, global innovations. And we need to add all of these new technologies into our curriculum. This is very vital. And now, the National AI Strategy Action Plan is very important, and there are many works and studies conducted within the framework of this action plan, and I greatly appreciate all of these works. And we also have ÖBA, which is an information network for teachers. And thanks to ÖBA, in the new century of Turkey, we are helping the Ministry of National Education is helping our students not only consume technology but also produce technology. And it is very important that our ministry is closely following up all the technological developments around the globe. And I want to focus on these issues as well. And I would like to thank our Deputy Minister for her address. Now I would like to continue with our second speaker, and I would like to give the floor to Mr. Halil Berktay. Now the floor is yours, related to leading education and transforming education. What would you like to say for today's world?
I imagine that my talk is going to be somewhat more heretical, should I say, offline, not mainstream, something of a deviation, compared with, for example, what we have just heard from Professor Ökten about the main line of the Ministry of Education. If I had to pick a title for this talk, I would say in Turkish, bilim için bilim, öğrenmek için öğrenmek. Science for the sake of science, scholarship for the sake of scholarship, learning for the sake of learning. There are two things that I would like to address. One, as a historian, a relatively macro view of Turkish history and the history of education from the 19th century to the present, including the first century of the Republic of Turkey. And secondly, I rather doubt that I will have time for this, but if at all possible, I would like to say a few things about my direct empirical observations and concerns as a practicing educator, as a practicing instructor, in terms of what I see about the university students that keep coming before us. And I should underline that in both cases, I will be speaking primarily as a historian out of my experience of the practice of teaching history. So a lot of my examples will be drawn from inside the profession, so to speak. Number one, Turkey and Turkish education from the 19th century to the present. Turkey's recent history is an example of late or delayed nation-state formation, faced with crises and emergencies of all kinds, involving the collapse of an empire and the transition, the extremely difficult transition from the decline of empire to a modern nation state. This process of delayed transition, delayed nationalism, delayed nationhood, brings with itself all kinds of dangers, all kinds of emergencies, including the prospect of partitioning and fragmented colonization, against which, of course, both 19th century Tanzimat modernization from above was intended as a remedy, and then also, of course, the national struggle of 1919-22 and the formation, the promulgation of the modern republic. I don't think that we can understand anything in recent history without this background of a sense of permanent crisis. So what it engenders is a process of a very anxious and hurried kind of catching up agenda. Gecikmiş ve telaşlı bir yetişmecilik. And it goes hand in hand with a very practical, pragmatic kind of modernism and modernization. I am opposing the concept of pragmatic modernization to contemplative modernization. Turkey never seems to have enough time. 19th century Tanzimat elites never seem to have enough time. 20th century Young Turks and then Kemalist Republicans never seem to have enough time to sit down and think about what it is that they are really doing, what are the intellectual and philosophical possible backgrounds, what are the implications, what are the implications from transferring from one kind of culture to another, etc. For any of this, there is never enough time. And it is in response to this kind of sense of permanent emergency, permanent crisis, that modern Turkish education, such as we know it, is called into being in the context of Tanzimat reforms from the 19th century onwards. And let us also remember that as part of this sense of crisis, what is the first agenda? The first agenda is actually importing the European army. That is to say, Avrupa ordusunu ithal etmek. The military have to be the first plank of the new agenda because, as I've said, the empire is faced with the question of survival or extinction. So you have to have a modern army, which means you have to have a modern officer corps, which means you have to have military schools, modern military schools, as the first priority. And all the rest of education is eventually subjected to or organized around or woven around that primary agenda of introducing modernity through military modernization and education for the purpose of military modernization. It has profound consequences. It leads to what I like calling a process of class formation through the state, class formation through education. Looking at European history and currents of thought and theory evolving through European history, we are accustomed to think of class formation through the economy as an economic process. Forms of property, what in Marxist theory would be called relations of production, etc., giving rise to a slave-owning class, giving rise to a feudal land-owning nobility, giving rise to something that we call the bourgeoisie. And so this does not really prepare us for fully comprehending this process of class formation through the state and through education in the Ottoman 19th century and the early 20th century. But this is what the new education does. It gives rise to a military bureaucratic class formed through education, which then tries to call forth a nation in its own image, again through education. Apart from the social, political, economic consequences, it also leads to a peculiar kind of interpenetration of politics or the state or government with education. Education becomes much too subservient to certain political or state objectives that keep coming and going and changing from generation to generation. It is primarily put in the service of this overall project of pragmatic modernization, including the political configurations that come to represent this primary agenda at various times. In the long run, I believe that this is not good for the future of education, for the future of scholarship, for the future of learning. It is a bit like the old debate about what is art for. I don't know about most of you. In my childhood and youth, back in the 50s and 60s, I remember having to write compositions, essays all the time on this subject. What is art for? Is art for society or is art for art? And very dutifully, all of us in those years kept writing, of course art is for society. Of course art has to have a mission, an overall political, ideological, sociological, whatever mission of serving society and helping to uplift society. I think that's comprehensively wrong. In terms of, if you are trying to produce great art does not come out of leading edge art, masterpieces, works that are works of genius, creativity, do not come out of a sense of collective mission that has been implanted on individuals. Instead, nowadays, after long decades, my perception is you have to be doing art for the sake of art. Only when you are doing art for the sake of art are you, in probability terms, capable of coming up here and there with great works of art, leading edge works of art, universal masterpieces, masterpieces that will address humankind in general and will make a place for themselves in world history. And by the way, this is the ultimate benefit for society at the end of the day. That is to say, paradoxically, the maximum benefit for society as a whole does not come out of trying to impose a sense of mission on art. Instead, it depends on allowing art to develop its own dialogues, conversations, traditions, practices in free space. So my wish for the second century of the Turkish Republic is that we switch from learning for this or for that sense of outside learning kind of purpose to practicing education for the sake of education, learning for the sake of learning, in the sense of doing art for the sake of art. Thank you.
Teşekkür ediyoruz değerli hocam. Kıymetli hocamız özellikle
Okay. We thank you very much, our esteemed professor Azmi Özcan. You provided some historical statements in order for us to understand the Turkish education system. We're coming from the Ottoman Empire to the Republic of Turkey. You said it was a belated and an heretic transformation that is hindered by the modernization movements in Ottoman Empire and the roles of crisis in these processes, especially the modernization of the military organization, for example. So, economy, the generation to generation transformation and the role of education over those two have been stated by our professor in light of a great example of an ongoing discussion about art. Thank you very much, our distinguished professor. Now we will hear Mr. Azmi Özcan. You have 10 minutes, professor. Please do your statement within this time.
About legal texts, I prefer reading. Nelson Mandela once is reported to have saying a famous sentences: "Education is the most powerful weapon that can change the whole world." Indeed, it is true. And constitutions are concise and concrete legal texts that regulate especially the sovereign rights of states and the hierarchy of the official institutions. So my paper is mainly about education and the constitutional developments in Turkey's century. Basically, what I'm going to do is taking off from Professor Berktay's place, how they are reflected in the Turkish constitutional text within the last 100 years. One of the main turning points in Turkish history in terms of constitutional changes was what was known as Tanzimat era. But there was no place in education in terms of legal formation. There were some sentences in the 1850 Edict of Tanzimat, but these were mainly because of the rights and duties of non-Muslim population of the Ottoman Empire. But the major breakthrough was the Constitution of 1876, which we call as Kanuni Esasi. There were important articles regarding the education. The first of these was, I quote, "Public education is free, provided that they comply with the specific law. Every Ottoman citizen is entitled to public and private education." Another important regulation was the Article 114. The first level of education will be compulsory for the Ottoman people, and its degrees and details will be determined by special regulations. As we'll see, everything was under strict control of the state. The Article 18 of Kanuni Esasi, I quote, "It is necessary for Ottoman subjects to know Turkish, which is the official language of the state, in order to be employed in state departments." It also states that both the official language of the Ottoman Empire and implicitly the language of instruction in education is also stated as Turkish. The emphasis on the fact that those who will be civil servants will be selected according to their merits and abilities, as stated in the article, can also be considered as one of the articles to be associated with education. But the major step in the constitutional developments in Turkish history was 1924, just after the foundation of new Turkish Republic. I quote, "Primary education is compulsory for all Turks and free in the state schools." The articles of 1924 Constitution clearly the continuation of Ottoman period and the regulations designed from 1876 onwards. Another constitutional important development was the text that was prepared after 1960 coup d'etat. Detailed arrangements were made in the 5 different articles. And Article 50 regulated education life. I quote, "Providing the education and training needs of the people is one of the primary duties of the state. Primary education is compulsory for all citizens, boys and girls, and is free in public schools. The state provides necessary assistance through scholarships and other means to enable successful students who lack financial means to gain the highest level of education. The state takes measures to make those who need special education due to their situation useful to the society." Again, Article 21st of the 1961 Constitution states, I quote, "Everyone has the right to freely learn and teach science and arts, to explain and disseminate them, and to conduct all kinds of research in these fields. Education and training are free under the supervision and the control of the state." Here we see the fundamental control of the state again stated here. The principles to which private schools should follow are regulated by law in accordance with the level desired to be achieved in public schools. Provisions have been made that I quote, "Education and training institutions cannot be opened contrary to the principles of modern science and education." This is also important because we see now the signs of ideological outlook within the constitutional text termed as no education and training institutions cannot be opened contrary to the principles of modern science and education. So, on the one hand, freedom of education and training were mentioned, and on the other hand, state surveillance and control was strictly emphasized. Private schools were allowed to operate, but it was stated that they could only be operated in the same line with the objectives of the public schools. One of the key issues on which the 1961 Constitution brought detailed provisions regarding the freedom of religion, conscience, opinion, and also provisions in the field of religious education and training. Accordingly, I quote, "Everyone has the freedom of conscience and religious beliefs and opinion, worships, religious rites and ceremonies that do not contradict public order or general morality, or the laws enacted for this purpose are free. No one can be forced to worship, participate in religious rites and ceremonies, or express their religious beliefs and convictions. No one can be condemned for their religious beliefs and convictions. Religious education and training depend only on the wishes of individuals and the wishes of minors' legal representatives." The most important point here draws attention is that religious education is left to the individual's own will or their legal representatives. Concerning the 21st and the 5th articles of the Constitution, freedom has been introduced to religious education. But in 1982 text, 1982 constitution, religious education became compulsory. These are important steps because it also demonstrates the changes in the world and its reflection in Turkey, as Professor Berktay also drew attention. Um, the 1961 Constitution mentioned the rights for religious education, but 1982 Constitution also introduced the forcible religious education. This is, I think, should be understood in terms of the developments in the Cold War area. The first and most comprehensive of 1982 Constitution was the Article 42. Accordingly, no one can be deprived of the right to education and training. The scope of the right to education shall be determined by law and by regulation. Education and training are conducted under the supervision and the control of the state, in line with Atatürk's principles and reforms. Here we again see the ideological outlook introduced in the Constitution of 1982. Education and training places that violate these principles cannot be opened. Freedom of education and training does not eliminate the duty of loyalty to the Constitution and the state. Primary education is compulsory for all students, boys and girls, and is free in public schools. The principles governing private primary and secondary schools are regulated by law in accordance with the level desired to be achieved by public schools. The state provides necessary assistance through scholarship. The article goes on as such, but I think here is the most important point, as my time finish, the establishment of Turkish Higher Education Council and the regulations regarding the establishment of universities and the supervisions of their activities. I think in the second period, I will dwell some of the points raised in this constitution for not taking your time. Thank you for all.
Teşekkür ediyoruz.
We would like to thank our distinguished professor Azmi Özcan. He especially talked about Kanuni Esasi, who was enforced in the Ottoman Empire in its very latest period. So setting off from Kanuni Esasi, our professor emphasized the importance of the important articles of education, and he drew attention that the education was free starting from these periods, and then he later touched upon the modernization movements in Ottoman Empire. He talked about Tanzimat and, well, despite education was not specifically placed in Tanzimat, the modernization movements also covered education to a great extent, as we know it, of course. After the foundation of Turkish Republic, it became the responsibility of the state to provide education to its citizens, a compulsory citizens for the boys and girls in the country, and education was covered within the scope of freedom of conscience, the freedom of liberty, the freedom of education became three pillars in the constitution of the Turkish Republic. We have also talked about the revisions of the constitutions in 1961 and 1982. We also talked about the education for religion that was made again a compulsory class after the declaration of 1982 constitution text. So I would like to thank for the first round to our esteemed panelists. Before we start with the round one, perhaps I can ask you a different question to direct the discussion. What do you think is expecting? What do you think we can expect from the second century of Turkish Republic? So you are from the Ministry of National Education. We know that you are taking some steps and taking some action in terms of education, but do you have any thing to tell us about our professors? Do you have anything to tell the policymakers about the educational needs of Turkey, for example? But in a nutshell, we would like to talk about the recommendations and the advice that you can give to our participants. But mainly, we will be talking about the expectations that you have from the educational side in the new century of Turkey over the social development of Turkish community. So we are looking forward to hearing your contribution, Celila.
Especially for Turkey's competitiveness, we would like to continue in harmony with the global developments, and it is really vital for us to harness the potential in terms of international education and international collaboration according to the needs of 21st century. We have our changing needs, and while we are raising our generations, the understanding of foreign policy in education should be also paid attention in all layers, in all steps. We are actually supporting international education. We have international platform for adult learning, and with these initiative, we are raising awareness for adult learning, and we are also enriching our content. And we would like to have a basic platform for this, and we are actually conducting this project with EU, and with 10,000 of users among 38 member countries. Turkey ranks first in terms of using this program. With the understanding of humanitarian diplomacy, we have many people under temporary protection in Turkey. This is humanitarian diplomacy, and I would like to underline humanitarian diplomacy of Turkey. And we also have another project that we carry out with UNICEF. It is for the guest country representatives, and we are also directing them into different training programs. And we have the online version of this program, and we started our negotiations. And we also have refugee students, and Turkey ranks first in terms of hosting refugee students. We have really high number of refugees and refugee students, and we are opening classrooms for the refugee students as well. And we have located all of these students into our national schools. We don't want any of the students or any of the children to lose years without education or without training. And we have different projects for the employment of the refugees as well, with the Syrians and with other guests coming from other countries. We are also trying to increase employment among them. We have different collaborations for social cohesion and social adaptation with different organizations, and we are also providing different opportunities. And Istanbul Türkiye Marif Foundation is also playing a vital role in these collaborations. And we have TÜBİTAK and other institutions which are also carrying many different projects and cooperation with us. We are also supporting them in different projects. We are focusing on these projects, and while we carry out detailed projects in all layers, we are trying to increase schooling and the average number of students for per teacher. We are close to OECD numbers. And also we have AI models and AI examples, and according to the AI applications of the countries reported by OECD, we have many institutions and agencies attending from Turkey, and there are important projects in the OECD reports of Turkey. And in the near future, for the special qualified students, we are also strengthening their thinking, and we have Center of Arts and we have AI workshop programs. We also have special education director general here, and I'm coming from OECD meeting, and most of the countries presented their AI works, AI projects, and they ask for evaluation. And I would like to use the word special, very special children we have. And we need to combine technology and science. And we were proud to tell about our projects. And actually, there was no opinion or thoughts from other countries related to these special children, but we expressed our projects for these special children. And we have many projects involving all of our children, teachers, students, and we are closely following up the different advancements. And we have 65 schools and institutions all around the world, and we are assigning teachers from Turkey, and we are carrying out education and training activities, and we are also our children abroad, and they are taking the same, they are receiving the same education as Turkish students in Turkey receive. So we also have different summer programs, and we are planning different programs wherever our people are in the world. We are mobilizing all of our efforts, and we are also sending and assigning teachers to different parts of the world, and we are also helping anyone who would like to learn Turkish, and we are also teaching Turkish through distance learning, and we are touching the hearts of our people for social cultural interaction. We believe that the most important bridge is education, and with this understanding we continue to carry out our works, and we are experiencing and we are sharing our experiences with different models of education. We have unique models, we preserve this tailor-made system of Turkey, and I would like to state that this target and the objective of education is to ensure that all the people are equal, there is a fair understanding, and you are all important for us. In all circumstances, we are going to support our people. And once again, I would like to salute you all wholeheartedly. Mr. Halil, Mr. Halil Berktay, what are our expectations for the century of Turkey?
I mean, historians have taught themselves not ever to try to extend generalizations from the past or the present into the future. I go by Ernest Gellner. Humans are underprogrammed animals, and therefore it is really impossible to predict what they will be doing in the future. I can only confine myself to my problems, my anxieties, my wishes. I said that in the beginning, I said that after some point, I would like to speak as a practicing educator, a practicing instructor. I have two major problems with my students. One, reading. Two, ferocity and competition in the class environment. I don't want to sound Eurocentrist, but I've taught at Birmingham, I've taught at Michigan Ann Arbor, I've taught at Harvard on two different occasions as a visiting professor. British or American students, when they come into the classroom, they actually come in having done all or most of the readings. And when you ask any kind of question about the readings, there will be 8 hands up clamoring to answer. This is what I mean by competitiveness and ambition in the classroom. I've been teaching in Turkey, I've been teaching for more than 50 years. 8 years or so at the Political Sciences Faculty of Ankara University, once upon a time, and then 3 years at Middle East Technical University, 6 or 7 years at Boğaziçi University, 19 years at Sabancı University, and now the last 7 years at Ibn Haldun University. Never ever, I'm sorry to say, have I confronted a classroom of students who are ready to respond about the readings. When I ask any opening question about, have you done this reading? Have you done that reading? Would anybody please summarize to me in 5 points, what are the basic ideas presented here by Jared Diamond or Michael Cook or Max Weber, etc.? There's complete silence. Number one, because there is this prevailing social culture of not appearing too forward, but retreating from seeming competitive into some kind of backwater of silent solidarity. Secondly, they don't know how to summarize, and this has to do with their high school background. And thirdly, the fundamental case is 99% of the time, they have not done the readings. Why don't they do the readings? Because there is the hidden assumption that the teacher will go over the readings anyway. And that has to do with the role of the teacher in especially Turkish secondary education, at the middle school and the high school level. The teacher is perceived as a répétiteur in ballet terms, or a belletman, as once used to be used in Turkish. That is to say, the task of the teacher is to take the textbook, and mind you, there is 90% of the time there is just one textbook, one official textbook, and the teacher will take the textbook, open the chapter for that day, and go over the textbook paragraph by paragraph. So we are going to hear about it in the classroom. Why read from the beginning? And what is there to read anyway? This single textbook with the didactic authoritarianism of the monolithic gray page. No asides, no side questions, no primary sources, etc. So these are, I don't think we can continue with this, frankly. I don't want this to continue into the second year of the Republic of Turkey. This kind of secondary education, dovetailing into the deficiencies of university education, higher education, is not really going to enable Turkey to stand up and be competitive and leading edge on a global scale in the second century of the Republic. So My first priority, and I know I'm not going to get this, but I will say it anyway, would be a comprehensive reform in secondary education based on a certain mental principle and based on one fundamental objective. My mental principle is less is more. There is too much of everything in Turkish education. Too many courses, too many learning objectives per course. This has to be reduced. Fewer courses, deeper courses. Fewer courses, many more class hours per week on this basis. No longer the single monolithic didactic authoritarianism of the textbook, but a variety of sources, and we should be capable of entrusting our teachers, our secondary teachers, to be judicious in their selection and interpretation and analyses of these texts. Forever the fear in Turkey, and I've been living through this for the last 50 years, is somehow the classroom will become over-politicized and polarized in political ideological terms. In the past, the one-party regime in Turkey in the 1930s used to claim, sometimes explicitly, sometimes between the lines, that Turkey is not yet ready for democracy. If you keep saying this, a country will never be ready for democracy. Similarly, if we keep not trusting and empowering our teachers, our classroom instructors, to more freely select texts and introduce pluralism into the classroom, we will never be ready for it. We have to be brave and we have to be able to take risks. The corollary is the role of the teacher. Throughout, from the 19th century into the present, Turkish teachers have been state functionaries, bureaucrats, the idea of the teacher as a memur. This has to be replaced by rehabilitating and reconstituting the prestige and credibility of the teacher as an autonomous intellectual. We have to re-intellectualize our teachers, and that is the key to secondary school reform, which is the only thing that will enable me eventually, as a university professor, to get students in my classroom who have actually done the readings and are willing to participate in active learning and are not afraid of making mistakes. This is another cultural dimension. If I make a mistake, what will the teacher say to me, and what will my classmates, how will they laugh at me? I don't want to be humiliated. This is a very major cultural dimension, and we have to collectively, cooperatively find ways of overcoming this. Thank you for your patience.
Teşekkür ediyoruz Halil Hocam.
Thank you, Mr. Halil Baktay. Now, Azmi Özcan, I would like to hear you as well for 5 minutes. What will be the expectations for the next century and what are your opinions? Thank you, Honorable Moderator. Well, 500 minutes will not be enough to answer your question, and there's a dense, intense rain. Maybe you are also hearing it. And it is like we are escaping from rain as the panelists. In our education history, there are three concepts which are determining our educational life. First one is defense, the second one is modernization. While these are all replaced in and present in our genetic codes, we believe that education is not an instrument of reality, it is not a struggle or effort to reach reality. We are using it as an opportunity to preserve something. And this first started with madrasa of military from Selçukis. And we have Batinis at that time. There were menaces, and they were trying to preserve the state and the values at that time. And throughout the history, this was the key concept in our educational history. That is why we couldn't get specialized in history. Look at the history, for example, look at the masters or, for example, PhD and other high institutions. We don't have it, and Eastern world does not have it. But when we have the problem of presence, and then we thought that there is another transformation issue other than defense. We were escaping from a fire without questioning, and we were trying to we are trying to rescue our nation. And naturally, as you know, there was not in competition incompatibility in terms of tissue. And in the 19th century, we came up with a solution of madrasa.
Modernleşmenin gereği olarak da modern
And as a requirement for modernization, we opened modern schools and some high schools for teachers, for example, until the era of Republic, of course. But after the foundation of the Republic, of course, we changed everything, not only in education, but in almost every field. In my English speech, I made the quotation from Nelson Mandela. I said education is one of the strongest weapons in the world. You can change the world with it. And this is indeed a reality within the light of the colonization process that the world went through. The education changed the world by atomizing the societies. I will give a brief example to that. Our professors here, me as well, have lived in other countries throughout our careers, financed by the same state and working with the professors from that state, and the institutions and the graduates of these institutions do see one another as threats in countries like us. In our country, for example, the high schools that we have like 5 or 6 different types of high school, and all of them, have different high schools. Of course, we have the science high schools, the social high schools, Anatolian high schools, etc. And all of these school types, consider themselves as the main pillars of the society, and they believe that they are the only ones to represent the values and virtues of society, and they are kind of seeing the others as their enemy. And therefore, the alumni consider the others as a threat to themselves. This is the atomization of the society, and we have to talk about it, because education is not a tool for defense or not a tool of modernization, but it is a fact of human right that we have to consider in our new century. There was something in the first constitution of Ottoman Empire. The schools the madrasa, were closed in the first years of Republic of Turkey, even though there was no such article in the first constitution. Ernest Hirsch, maybe you heard about him. He is a Jewish law person escaping from the Nazi Germany, coming to Istanbul. I heard about his memories. I read about his memories. He came to Istanbul as a refugee and opened the law faculty. And in his memories, he says that they built up, they constituted the law faculties at universities, but the law faculties that they knew were based on the Jewish and Christian law. So this was a whole paradigm shift in Turkey, and well, it happened so. If we do not consider education as a basic human right, then we cannot prevent victimization or the desperation of people. I have many young colleagues in this hall. I would like to remind you that it's not all about education. Our problem is not only education, but to employ the outcomes of this education, the alumni, the graduates. We believe that God is fair, God is just. And well, we know that 8% is the ratio of highly educated people in any society in the world. But the problem is how they are employed. If you are trying to create a sports person from a musician, if you are trying to convert an academic person to a merchant, to a shop owner, then you cannot prevail. Therefore, education and employment should be handled hand in hand, and the qualified people should be employed in the area of their qualification. The last thing I would like to touch upon, dear colleagues, is, well, let's say a smartphone. It costs approximately $1,000. It weighs like 300 grams. So made from 300 grams of iron, but it's $1,000. If you want to go to a hardware store and purchase 300 grams of iron, you can purchase it for $1, for a dime. So the difference between this 300 grams of iron in my hand and 300 grams of raw iron is education. If you do not provide education, you cannot sell 300 grams for $1,000. If we do not value education, then we cannot prevent the victimization that people are going through in Gaza. If you want to create education, you have to pay attention to employment. I believe and I hope that in the new century of Turkey, the education will be provided in a liberal manner. We believe that the flowers of reality, the flowers of justice, can only blossom in the garden of education. Thank you very much, distinguished participants. We have finished our first panel. In order to make the best use of time, I will only accept very short questions because there will be another, panel after us. And please do not, do your contribution, but only introduce yourself briefly and ask a brief question, as brief as possible. Thank you very much. Just introduce yourself and ask a short question. It will enable us to make the best use of the time. I see a gentleman here raising hand. Please take the microphone to the gentleman so that the translators can hear. If there is a question in a different language, we have our translation headsets, so you can also wear them. They are over there.
I'm Shasivar Kabashi. I'm from Kosovo. I'm doing my PhD here in Istanbul University. You talked about education, history of education in Turkey, but we have problem with history in education system in Balkans. It's a joke that say you don't need to declare war against your neighbor in Balkans. You just mention something from history. and you are in the war. For that,
I didn't hear
yeah,
anything.
yeah,
Evet.
it's a joke
Öncelikle soruyu kime yönelttiğinizi de ifade ederseniz.
to historians.
Her ikisine.
Yeah.
Eyvallah.
It's a joke in Balkan that say that you don't need to declare war against your neighbor. You just mention something from history and you are in the war. For that we have a problem in historiography with historiography. I mean, we have problem in education system with history because, as you know, our history of each countries have an ideological problem. What can we do in this aspect? We can't change history, but we can change point of view. We can change methods. And in this point, what can we do as Balkan states in this point? Thank you very much.
Teşekkür ederiz. Kim cevaplamak?
Okay, who would like to answer? Professor Berktay, Professor Özcan, whoever want to take the question. I think
Is about history. There is a saying, famous saying, history is the reason for all the wars. In fact, if you want two people to get fight, you just change history because history is the most exploited area of interest for human being. Another is religion. So
Tamam hocam, görelim.
if you want to meddle with one nation or one country, what you do is you change their history first and also interpret their religion. This is exactly what has been done in the past for our countries. To give you an example, the Turkish Arab history is defined for the last 100 years by the classical texts of Bernard Lewis, George Antonius, Philip Hitti, and people like this. They are all, as their name suggests, outside the area, and they are meddling with the histories of both nations. And as a result of this, the Turks regarded the Arabs as betrayals. The Arabs regarded the Turks as the colonizers. But in fact, the truth is not both of them. Again, as I suggested in my Turkish speech, the only way to counteract this danger is to teach what has been really past, not to interpret that, not to interpret them as the state's interest or individual interest or ideological interest. In Turkish, we have a saying regarding the history, which I like very much. Tarih, vakayı.
history is the teaching of the cases as they happened without any changes.
Once we stop exploiting history for our own individual interest or ideological or religious interest, I think we can overcome this problem. Thank you.
Teşekkür ediyorum. Halil hocam, sizden de hemen hızlıca bir cevap alalım.
Okay, Professor Berktay, can you please also elaborate on that?
I will be speaking about 2 hours in response to your question. I happen to be a historiography specialist, more specifically, a specialist in nationalist historiographies. In the past, I've spent years in multinational history education projects in the Balkans, which means that I've been in the same classroom with, for example, Bosniak and Serbian and Croatian school teachers, and I managed to come out alive. And I've been in the same classroom with Greek and Bulgarian and Serbian and Turkish school teachers, and I managed to come out alive. 19th century German Prussian style history was fundamentally national history, focusing on a national grand narrative, our great achievements, our victories, and our defeats, invariably unjustly and unfairly in the hands of others. So it can be said, in fact, of all Balkan nationalist historiographies that they are mutually sensitive. They are very much aware of what the others are saying, but they are at the same time mutually hostile and mutually exclusive. Just consider a single example. What happened in 1453? In Turkey, and for Turkish historians, this is İstanbul'un fethi, the conquest, the capture of Istanbul. For Greek historians, this is the fall of Constantinople. Fall and Constantinople, part of a tragic narrative, and conquest and Istanbul, part of a triumphant narrative. The War of 1919-22. On the side of Turkey and Turkish history, this is our independence struggle, our national struggle, whatever. On the Greek side, this is the Mikrasiatiki catastrophe. This is the catastrophe of Asia Minor. So neither side has any sense of what it means for the others, what it meant for the other. The solution? The solution to teach critical, universal history in a critical language that is alive to all these nuances. And this is, frankly, as a practicing historian, what do I do in my teaching? I try to make my students aware of all this. There is no other solution.
Teşekkür ediyoruz. Bir soru daha alayım müsaadenizle.
Thank you very much. I will receive one more question. The gentleman in the fifth row. Sorry for I will ask my question in French. If you like to receive a headset, you can. My question is for Professor Berktay. The translation is in question. My name is Idris Samariz Idris. I'm from Chad. I am very impressed and, I became sentimental by what Professor Berktay mentioned about his students, because in Chad we have a lot of students who are attending Turkish universities, and we also saw that there is not a great competition among these students. Thanks to Professor Berktay, we can urge competitiveness and fairness among students. We know about the reforms, and even though the states accept them, this will take long, especially in especially for the teachers who work in the primary and secondary schools. What do you recommend us to become more competitive? Well, we are working a lot, but there is the resistance and is this fear for compete. Therefore, the kids cannot grow to be competitive, and they go to university. They are expected to be competitive, and they are expected to be overcome by their fears, overcoming their fears. But how can we do that? Kaldı mı yanlış?
had to put on my earphones in time to hear the complete translation, the complete interpretation. But so, I mean, the gist of my remarks on the second round were that the educators must first be educated themselves. We have to have a new kind of, I'm speaking about Turkey, and I'll restrict myself to training history teachers, okay? But it is very clear that we have to have a comprehensive reform in ways of teaching our teachers and preparing them for their school teaching careers. So, I mean, we come from these similar backgrounds, colonial or semi-colonial backgrounds, in which complex cultural factors come together, combine to create this unnecessary kind of culture of excessive modesty, shall we say, on the part of our students, and it is up to the teacher. I really don't have the answer, frankly. I really don't have any answer other than this is a kind of cultural change that takes place over 2 or 3 decades or more. But teachers in classroom space have to find ways of encouraging their students to speak up and to participate. And they have to do away with a culture of fear at making mistakes. This is crucial. Fear at standing out from the crowd, fear of standing out as an individual, and fear of making mistakes. I tried to refer to this in my previous talk in the second round, but this is profound. This is, you are not supposed to stick out like a sore thumb. You are not supposed to make yourself obvious and prominent, and your fellow students will joke with you and they will say things like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to curry the favor of the teacher? Are you trying to become the teacher's pet, etc.? In Turkish, there is a word, ukala, and I don't quite know how to translate it. But somebody who is vociferously providing unnecessary information all the time. So that becomes a stigma, being an ukala, speaking out in class all the time. And we somehow have to find individual and collective ways of eliminating this stigma and replacing with the idea that coming up with your ideas, coming up with your learning, coming up with your knowledge and sharing it with your classmates is a good thing. Pedagogical studies, I'm not a professionally trained pedagogue, but pedagogical studies reveal that actually, I mean, if you do studies on who students are learning from, in good learning environments, in the best universities, they are learning much more from their peers in the classroom than their professors or instructors. And this is crucial. This is why we have to be able to create that kind of classroom environment, and why we have to have that kind of student quality and emphasize that active learning and participation and sharing your knowledge with your classmates is crucial. When you speak up, you are not necessarily currying favor with your professor. You are actually, without realizing it, sharing your knowledge with your classmates and also positing yourself as a role model for them. Now, this is a struggle that it has been going on for decades and it will continue. It is a fundamental cultural transformation that is involved.
Teşekkür ediyoruz hocam. Sahne arkasından uyarılar almaya başladık. Çok özür diliyoruz. Süremizi olabildiğince aştık. Bir sonraki oturumun da hakkını yememek adına burada özellikle konuşmacılarımıza çok özel
We would like to thank our speakers in the new century of Turkey with the depth of these agreements and discussions. We are very pleased to have our speakers, and I would like to congratulate you for the Day of Teachers, 24th of November, and I would like to extend my regards to everyone.
To learn there about education, its importance, and also its future. We'll keep you with us for a little while. I would like to invite to the stage the president of the Turkish Marif Foundation, Professor Dr. Birol Akgün, to present gifts to our speakers.
Hocam ağzına sağlık. Sizden de getirin onları. Ağzına sağlık. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Nereden hocam? Bakarsın. Ağzına sağlık. Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Teşekkür ediyorum. Hocam ağzına sağlık. Son özetleme çok fazla. Nasıl olursa hocam ağzına sağlık. Çok teşekkür ederim hocam. Çok sağ olun. Evet.
Hocam.
Hep beraber şey yapalım. Şöyle gözle alın isterseniz. Şöyle aranıza gireyim.
We'd like to thank our moderator and our guests for joining us today in this very enlightening discussion. Thank you so much to each and every one of you. We appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, we will have a 10 to 15-minute break. Please be back here in tops 15 minutes time so we can continue with the rest of our program. Thank you.
Thank you.